Hi there, my name is Young. I'm a real estate agent, and today we're going to talk about blips when you're closing. Recently I had a couple of recently when I had a closing we had some issues with the lien as well, and then I realized, you know what? There are some blips and there are some issues when you're closing down the road. That does happen often. What I experienced was very rare case, but for most of the part, other things that happen before closing is very real, and it happens as a horror story time to time when you're talking to other friends, other colleagues, or somebody else that you know. So anyways, let's break into it. So basically, before, honestly, when you are thinking of buying a real estate and you go through the hardship of looking for properties and find the right property that you want, and then you go down to negotiation and you actually do a good negotiation and you're satisfied with the house. And after you're satisfied with the house, then you do the financing condition and you go through the home inspection condition. After the whole inspection is done, now that you love the house, that you're happy to fulfill or waive the condition, that you go firm on this deal. So, there was a lot of actions that has happened before, and every one of them is important, but it's also important that before you close, you don't make these mistakes. Let's go through one of the most common problems that a lot of buyers go through when they're closing. So first problem is you have the pre-approval all done and you have mortgage conditions all done. You have gotten a letter from the mortgage company or bank that you got your mortgage and you signed it off. And now you're completely done. You don't have to worry about mortgage anymore. So it's because it's going to get funded. So with that in mind, you decide to go shopping for furnitures and you decide to spend $10,000 on your credit card or buy a car or get a financing loan for something else. These it may not impact you as significantly, but in case you're very tight with the GDS and TDS ratios and you're already very close and the bank gave you approval on your tight GDS and TDS ratios, if you do purchase anything with your credit card, if you do buy a new car, if you do finance a new car, or if you finance your other things, like furnitures or electronics or anything like that, those do impact your borrowing power. And when the banks see these finances up to $10,000 in furnitures or appliances or electronics or anything like that, the lender have the right to verify your finance situation prior to closing. And if anything changes since you accepted the mortgage agreement and before the closing, and if they do check your debt to income ratio spike before closing, they have the right to remove themselves from your mortgage as well. They don't have to fund that for you. So it's very important that you don't make that mistake and try not to buy anything before you're closing. And also another thing is if you do change your job as well. Let's say after you did purchase your property, you happen to come across a job that you dreamed of, really. And it's a fantastic workplace that you've been always, wanting to go. And they gave you the job opportunity. Then, and you take the job and you're on probation time. Guess what? It's not going to work out for your mortgage as well. The lender, because you switched your job and you're on probation period, they're not going to fund you that mortgage either. So it's very important that you know these things can cause you serious problem with getting your finances, getting your mortgages. So please be aware of these problems. From the day that you get pre-approval letter or approval letter, until the keys are in your hands, do not get new loans. Do not buy major appliances. Do not get new credit cards. And do not switch your jobs with probation. If you're going to switch the job, then so do not change the job as well. Those are very important. Second, that happens commonly, this is more common than anything else, is the upfront PST shock. This upfront shock happens on first-time home buyers. So let's say as a first-time home buyer, you don't have a lot of money and you're putting 5% down plus remaining 10% down of over 500K. So let's say, for example, you're buying $800,000 home and you put down 5% plus 10%. So 5% of the 500K is 25K and remaining 10% is 30K, so 55K. You put 55K down, then you have mortgage of $745,000. And on top of that, you get CMHC mortgage insurance. So mortgage insurance adds to your mortgage as well. That's around 4%. So around that is around like $30,000 of mortgage premium, right? So that adds to the mortgage. On top of that, now you have to pay 8% provincial taxes on that $30,000. So 8% of that is around $2,400 or $2,300, around that area. So you have to pay that on closing, not on top of your mortgage. Like the mortgage insurance goes on to your mortgage, but this PS 8% provincial taxes that you have to pay on top. You have to pay on closing. It doesn't go onto your mortgage. First, a lot of first-time home buyers, when they're buying, they're thinking of land transfer tax, solicitor fee, all that, and they don't have a lot of money. But on top of that, they have to pay this 8% provincial taxes on their insurance premium. So the buyers, if they're not educated, if they don't know, and if they have nobody to help them out, they're in a real dire situation. So please, you have to make sure that as your first-time home buyer, and if you're paying mortgage premium, you have to pay 8% on the mortgage premium amount as taxes. You only pay this when you are paying if you're buying a house with loan to value over 80%. If you're paying over 20% deposit, then you don't have to worry about this. But if you're paying 5%, 10%, then you have to think about this mortgage premium as well. Third disaster that happens regularly, the closing nightmare. So what basically this means is that when you buy a home, you have all these chandeliers, you have high-end appliances like, let's say, Sub-Zero fridge or Wolf gas stove top. Let's say something like that. That was there on the purchase you're buying. But on the closing, when you go and see the property, it's swapped into like Whirlpool fridge and Whirlpool stovetop. So that's not the stovetop or the fridge that you got or chandelier that you paid. Instead of chandelier, you got this $2 light bulb from Dollarama. So you look at it, you're like, oh shoot, I didn't pay for these things. So first thing first, it's important that your realtor also take photos of these chandeliers and photos of stovetop, range hood or range, fridge, dishwasher, anything like that, because those could be swapped in one way or another on closing. So it's very important that you have those, because on MLS or APS, sometimes it doesn't specify specifically. So what you do is you take a photo of all these appliances and description stickers, then you have that as a record. And on the closing, when you go and if they're swapped, then you tell the lawyers that, hey, these were the appliances that was there before and these chandeliers were there before. Please tell the sellers to bring them back and reinstall the original ones that we saw before closing. So by doing so, then you're being protected, and this should be happening on your closing date, not a day after, not a day before. On the closing date, on the day before, you can still go around and see the property, but you cannot assess anything. You can just look. You can't touch anything. You can't turn on the tab. You can't check the appliances or anything like that because they're not yours technically, and we don't have the power. We don't have the authority to check these appliances or water or anything like that. So please be aware. So really, that's very important. So as a realtor, again, I take photos of these appliances. I take photos of these stickers that's on the side so that it shows exact model numbers and names so that we don't get to this problem down the road. And next is electrical wire transfer limbo. So this happens time to time, when you're trying to rush things in the last minute, or your closing date's very close, or your state of adjustment didn't come in time or anything like that. It has a different impacts, but most importantly, because wire transfers can take some time, I rather have bank drafts ready and give it to the lawyer a day before or 2 days before so that we don't get into this issue down the road. This happens quite often. And if you're a buyer and you sent your wire transfer already, but the money didn't come to your solicitor, then you're not closing. And guess what? TerraView and all these things that lawyers use to move the titles from the seller to the buyer, they stop at 5 o'clock. You can't do anything after 5 o'clock. So it's very important that you have your funds ready and sent to the lawyer prior to closing, preferably 24 hours prior, so that there's no issues down the road. And of course, next thing that happens frequently is you get movers at 9 o'clock of the closing date. So guess what? It doesn't happen very often. And closings usually happen between 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and most of the time after 3 o'clock from my experiences. So it's very important that from my point of view, I think it doesn't make sense for you to move on the day of closing. Closing date should be the date that you go and check the property out. So make sure that there is no deficiencies, or there's no problems with the appliances, or there's no problem within the house, so that if there's a problem, you tell the owners, you tell the sellers that these are the problems, or these are the changes that happen. So you need them to fix them. This is a date for you to do that. If you move in and the lawyers are closed and all your stuff, belongings are inside the house already, it's gonna be tough to know if there's any deficiencies behind the walls or anything like that. So please, for your protection, it's the best if you, on the day of closing, you just go in to assess the unit, so that if there's any problem with the unit, negotiate with your lawyer to the seller's lawyer, that you can either get those compensated, fixed, or you have to go through small claims court or all that stuff. So please do that. It's very important. It's for your protection. And lastly, this also can happen, and it's not common, but this is like a domino effect. So you're buying a home, and the seller, of course, sold their home, and now they went searching to buy their own home, and they also bought a home. And the other seller, who sold it to your seller, they couldn't close because the other seller that they were trying to go in couldn't close on time, or other way around. Again, it happens. It's not common, but it happens at time to time. So then what happens to your house? Like, you're supposed to get the keys, but you couldn't get the keys because the seller couldn't close. So it's not a deal breaker. The deal can still go on, but now it comes in a territory between the lawyer to lawyer. Now the seller, they couldn't close because of XYZ reason. They have to compensate you they have to give you it's either they have to do extension, or they give you accommodation agreement. So that's basically saying the seller are going to pay for your movers that you hired. They're going to pay for your stay that you already moved out from your home, or like you need another place because you sold your house, or you stopped renting out because you told them that you're going to not rent anymore. All these things happen, and those are money. And these monies that needs to be paid by somebody is going to be paid by the seller, because seller couldn't close their own home on time. Yeah, I think those are the most of the things that when you are buying a home, that can happen to you at times that you're not expecting. And closing is very important. And before you close everything, like talking to your solicitor is important, talking to your mortgage broker is important, talking to your real estate agent is important. And The problem with these, oh yes, so my story. So yeah, this is another thing that doesn't happen very often. So there could be liens to your property, to the property that you're purchasing. Let's say there could be contractors lien to the property because they didn't pay their roofers that was done 3 years ago. Any random stuff like that, and the sellers are to provide to the buyers with title that's clean and there's no lien on their title. So because of that, if there was any liens in the past, then all those monies that the seller owed must be paid prior to closing. If there's a lien prior to your closing, it's not a problem for you because the seller has to do it themselves. But let's say the seller decided to renovate their house and they spend like $300-400K. They owe money to the contractors because they said the last bid like maybe 20-30%. The seller realized it's too expensive, they can't afford it, so they said to the contractor, I'm not paying you. So guess what? The seller, the contractor can put a lien to the property within 60 days. But the problem is, if let's say the house was sold to a buyer within 30 days of closing after they listed, but the contractor has 60 days to put their lien to the property. So guess what? If that's the case, then let's say the contractor didn't put lien until after the buyers bought the property. Then now the buyers on the lien, the buyer's property is under lien because the contractor put a lien to their property. So now the buyers has to go through the litigation solicitor to go after the seller the seller has to pay for all these lien and clear their title. So this becomes a hot mess, and that's something you need to understand that could happen for your property. So whenever you're buying a renovated property, that's within yes, you have to ask those questions as well. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you have any questions with your purchasing, or if you need to ask more further questions about your closing, all that, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. My name's Young. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you have a good day. Bye.